Melissa Snell owns and runs InSync Constructions with her husband Chris. It's a residential building company and they are passionate about building exceptional homes, and their aim is to turn dream homes into a reality. They pride themselves on their personalised service. That means every client is treated individually and that each home meets the client's unique needs and wants. We know building can be expensive and scary and stressful, but Melissa is committed to making the journey as simple and as smooth as possible. She says open communication during the process is key and that the client should be involved in every aspect. Melissa, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's the first for me.
It sounds like you work really hard, so let's start with playing hard. Resorts or caravans when it comes to holidays?
Caravans.
Really? Why?
We just love the lifestyle. Resorts are nice, but we are definitely more camping kind of people. Yeah, just both Chris and I are both like that. We like the nature, we like country. That just suits us better.
And yet you're building these beautiful designer homes.
Oh, and I love that too. I love seeing what people can come up with. We're doing a most beautiful home right now and it's like, that is like a resort. It's going to be amazing.
So on that, I've heard some absolute horror stories when it comes to building. Can people enjoy the process of building a home?
That is one of the most important things that we say when we first meet clients, is that anyone can build your home. We want you to enjoy the process because we love what we do. And we also want you to love what we do. And so part of the process is part of the fun. We have a laugh with our clients. We try and make the job as enjoyable as possible and stress-free as possible. So we just try and make it fun.
Which making it fun can sometimes not be fun for you.
Yeah.
Which pulling all this huge, amounts of emotion, dollars, the whole process requires a huge operation. You're so good at it. Why?
Experience maybe too. We've been doing it for a while now. We've made mistakes along the way. We've learnt from those mistakes. Every time we do make a mistake, we always learn, how can we make this better? But the most important thing is to make the whole road enjoyable. And any kind of worries that the clients may have, we try to alleviate that. So and you can pick things up from clients too when you first meet them, what they're going to be most stressful about. It might be a time thing because they're renting out a unit. So we know that we've got to keep up to date with them all the time with how the timing's going. Some things are out of our control, like the weather and all those things. So we have to constantly tell them how things are going. So it might be money, it could be decision fatigue, it could be anything like that. So whatever their worries are, we try to help them and assist them as much as we can throughout the process.
And you're a good operator. So where did this come from? What did you do before building?
I grew up on the Northern Rivers, so country, and I went to uni to be an accountant. Did that for 1 year and learnt that was boring. It wasn't what I signed up for. So I changed to marketing and sales. That was definitely up my alley more than accounting, even though accounting would have been super helpful now. And then I moved to Sydney and met Chris. And so he was a carpenter apprentice, like 21, and I did corporate. So it was marketing, sales, so nothing to do with what I'm doing right now. We got married. We then moved back up north, and I worked Chris started working for someone else because he'd never worked on his own. And he had a little business called CBS Carpentry. So he worked for someone else, not enough for me to do any work for him. So I had another job and worked as regional coach and trainer at APN Newspapers. So again, teaching salespeople how to sell. And then I was, again, just doing the books for Chris. He then started getting inquiries for just decks and little additions. And up there's a lot of people have land, so there was mostly homes being built. So the builders were getting these inquiries that they didn't want to do, so they were passing it on to Chris. And so I thought, hang on, there's a little niche here. We can just have a little business and just do small little decks and verandas. And so we started this business called Lifestyle Decks and Additions. Again, it was very small, not enough for me to work full-time in the business. But we were never without work. It just continued until probably 2007, 2008, there was rumblings, and we had a lot of self-funded retirees, and they were just pausing their jobs for the moment. And we thought, what's going on? There's something going on in the economy. And Chris came down to Sydney again. He had his contacts still down here. And he said, Mel, Sydney's fine. Well, I don't know what's happening up here. So we made the move to go to Sydney. So we left everything. We actually rented out our home. We had a beautiful property, built this lovely house. People up there was telling us we were crazy to leave this beautiful lifestyle to come down to Sydney. But we thought, something's just not right. So, we came to Sydney. Chris started working for someone else, and then the GFC hit. So we were still working fine. We had a job. People up there then told us that we made the move at the correct time. People were having to leave their families to go to the mines for work. Country got hit harder. Then after a while, when things still seemed to be going fine, Sydney, there was a few builders that got in trouble. They were undercutting each other because work was getting tight. But then we started getting inquiries and we started moving on, and I worked for another building company, so it was in commercial and fire safety. So I learnt a lot about the commercial side of things, contracts, fire safety. I knew nothing about that. Doing the books for Chris on the side, then we started getting more and more inquiries. And I thought, okay, I need to help Chris out with some more work. So we decided for me to leave that job, and I worked full-time then within the business, and then book work ended up being the smallest part of my job. I just did more and more and really learnt along the way.
Yeah, you've definitely learnt, which is awesome to see. Now, you're a great building company, right? Produce some amazing homes, like Dan said. However, do you think it's unfair sometimes because you have that skill of sales and marketing, which comes naturally to you, which is due to your previous work? Do you think that strength is crucial to a business like yours, just so you can get, obviously there's plenty of great builders, but that edge in marketing, do you think that helps?
Possibly. I think everyone, when I speak to other business partners like myself, they've all come from a different background that's helped them. I've got a friend who's an accountant that's helped them, and I've got someone who's had customer service background that's helped them. So everyone's has a little bit of their background can help them in some way. Definitely sales and marketing has helped us, absolutely. When we meet a client for that first time, you've got such a short period of time to build that trust and rapport. Money is not a massive issue to us, or we try to make it out. It's not to the client either. It's who you pick to build. So I think those kind of sales techniques can slip into there, but you still got to be able to pull it off, don't you? You can only talk so much. You've got to have the proof that you can provide that.
And over those 30 years you just walked us through quickly, what was the moment, or when was the moment that you thought, it's not about the end product for the client, they actually need to enjoy it, they need to be brought along with it? Was there a defining moment, or has it just that evolved for you?
I'm not sure if it was a defining moment. It definitely has evolved, because I kept thinking when we built our house, I loved every single moment of it. And so I do that with our business. I often think of what they're going through as what I went through when we built our home. And I remember when our last house that we just finished building, I remember one of our tradies said to me, Mel, I've never seen someone so excited about every little part. Like I'd get excited with the first floorboard or the door handle. And I try to give that excitement to the clients. And that's what I try to say when I meet them. We want you to enjoy that every little moment. It's different even when you build a brand new home and then you walk in and everything's done. When you're renovating, you get to enjoy all those little moments. And that's what I try to portray to them, to enjoy how exciting you're getting doors, how exciting your roof's going on, all that kind of thing.
You have door handles.
Yeah, door handles.
Yeah, the ones you picked are now in your house.
Exactly. Yeah. I get excited over that, so it might just naturally come off. So.
We do forget the journey, like as in we forget to celebrate the journey. So for example, there's about 20 months front end when a client says, hey, I'm going to build, to eventually choosing their builder and starting is roughly 20 months. And then homes that you build are somewhere around 12, 14 months. That's a long time if you don't stop and celebrate the journey, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. even when I was speaking to Chris about the podcast and talking about some of the moments, we were reminiscing about even where we've come from when we first started our business and to where we've come now. I was saying, remember when we were doing those decks and we were literally drawing the deck on a bit of paper. We didn't even have to get an architect or draftsperson to do it. And I would walk down to council with all the bits of paper and a cheque and sign over for the TA. Like we were just laughing at those of where we started to where we've come. It's good.
So just on that, was it easier then or easier now?
It could have been easier then purely because I had another income coming in. So there was that security. It was also easier then because any little mistakes we made were small. So we learnt everything in a small scale. But it still was really hard because we had no idea what we were doing. We were flying by the seat of our pants. We were a partnership. All our money was mixed into one. So business and personal money were going in and out. No accounting knowledge that I learned in that 1 year made any of it, did not help me at all. So now it's easier now because we feel so much more confident in what we're doing. And we're confident also in our own skill set. So it's really easy when I go into sales mode, it's so easy for me to sell Chris because they say, you've got to be a good salesperson, you have to respect your product and know that what you're selling you believe in. And I believe in Chris. So it's really easy for me to sell him and then I just come on and say, oh, and by the way, and I can do this and that for you. I think it's easier now because of the skills we've learnt and the experience we've gained.
Because you talked about the sort of the worries or the security of having your own job and the stable income. You've got a great business now and you could say that it is very stable, but there's a big anxiety that goes with construction of, how do I fund this? How do I get the resources? How do I get the supply? When's my next job coming up? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, again, back when we first started our own business, excuse me, I remember we put on our first apprentice. And that was really scary because it wasn't just the security of us having work. It was we have to pay him regardless if we work or not. And so that was a really big thing for us. And now moving forward with our 10 or 12 employees of that kind of thing, going back when we backed up to Sydney and we started our own, I remember thinking, oh, we've got a job booked up until Christmas. That was my milestone all the time is we've got enough work until Christmas. And that was only a job here and there. So it was pretty scary. We probably had more, I think we might have had a couple of apprentices or subbies. So it was that a little bit of the security was lessened because we don't pay them if we don't work. But it definitely was scary. I did have that other income coming in, but once I stopped working somewhere else, we knew, okay, this is go time now. And yeah, ever since, but because I joined the business, we were able to grow it more as well. So we were able to take on more work and yeah, it's paid off.
2008, though, global financial crisis you mentioned. We've also since then had a pandemic, of course, which wasn't necessarily bad for the building industry, but we're seeing interest rates rise now and things slow down as people get cautious and nervous. How do you ride the wave of the good times and the bad times? How are you making sure that you survive when we see so many other small builders not survive?
Foresight. We don't have a crystal ball. Chris, as you know, Jay, he's very good at speaking to people. He keeps his ear to the ground. He speaks to not just our clients who might be in different industries. They might be in financial, IT, self-funded, all those kind of things. He speaks to them. He speaks to not just financial advisors or business coaches about what are you hearing, what's going on, but he'll speak to the suppliers. He speaks to the tradie guys who are loading the timber on your truck. He speaks to everyone and he just listens. He's a history buff. He loves his history and he likes to see sometimes where history can repeat and patterns. And he's thinking, well, this feels like when it was this time and, those kind of things. So because he's been able to speak to people in advance, he can get sometimes a little bit of foresight of what could potentially happen. So another time a few years ago, we were up north. We were down in Sydney. We came up north to visit family, and this was before the pandemic hit, and the bushfires had just happened. And he was speaking to the timber yard guy up there at Woodburn. He said, "How's things going? How's things going?" He goes, "Supply's going to be tough soon." And Chris said, "Why?" And he said, "The bushfires have not helped. There's going to be a timber supply shortage." We went back to Sydney, and Chris spoke to his local timber supply place and said, "I heard timber's going to be short soon." Nah, it's not going to be an issue. Chris is like, It's interesting that he said it, but they're not saying. Then fast forward a bit, we had the pandemic as well, and we knew supply is going to be a problem. There's timber's going to be an issue. So what Chris did was looked at all our jobs we had booked up for the year, and we ordered all the materials. People were struggling to get supply. There were people not working and jobs had halted, not ours, because we kept going. We didn't have a storage shed even back then. Our whole driveway was full of things. Our cars were on the street. Our driveway was packed full of material. Job sites were packed with materials wrapped. If we weren't going to start their job for 5 months, we'd say, "Can we put stuff in your garage?" And they'd go, yeah, because we want you to start. So we just did things like that. It took a little bit of a hit on the cash flow because we were buying things in advance. But Chris said, "I don't want a job to stop." So sometimes clients would pay for that material in advance, so we'd just sign off on it. So that was good, but it worked in our favour because then it got worse and worse with the supply issue, especially in the following year, in 2021. I remember I had an apprentice come to work one day, and he said, "Mel, me and 3 other boys are the only ones who are working right now. The rest are sitting at home waiting for the job to continue." And so I was like, "Oh, good on you, Chris, good on you, Chris." Then, of course, we had the price hikes. Again, we got wind of that. Everyone did. It was obvious. It was on the television all the time. It was in the media. It was telling us that prices were going to go up. Now, no one knew how much it was going to go up. We didn't. But because we had already purchased the product, because it was the timber supply that was the majority of the big price increases, we'd already bought that. So for the rest of the jobs, those prices were already locked in. So we were okay. The future ones that we had done quotes for had not signed contracts. We explained to them, due to the rising costs that were everywhere that they could see, we're going to have to revisit your quote. So we would have to, and they were okay. They understood that. No one wants a builder to go broke in the middle of their project because it doesn't go well for the builder, but it also doesn't go well for the client because they're going to have to get another builder to requote it, and it's going to be higher. So then so then those kind of projects we would requote. We also changed our model a bit where we were trying to push more cost plus jobs instead of contracts, fixed price. We thought it was more fairer for us as well as the client because otherwise you're going to could possibly overquote for the client. We've got one particular job next year that is a construction loan. It has to be a fixed price contract, and they want a contract now as well. We're a bit nervous about it. It is a big job. It's not something that you think, "Oh, it's okay." It's a second stage. They want us. We want the job. I looked at Chris and said, "What will make you feel comfortable when signing off now?" And he said, "Getting a lot of the timber." The client said, "Yep, we're in." They had their own money as well, so we bought all their timber and it's in our storage. They're paying for storage as well as materials, and it's in our shed waiting for next year. We probably won't start that job till April next year, but we've already got those timbers. The rest of the quote we've put as provisional sums where we think we're not quite sure, and that's how we sort of got through this anyway.
You talked about Chris and his intuition, if you like. They talk about a woman's intuition. You know, you're a big part of this business, and there's not a lot of women in construction, but we're seeing it a lot more these days, and I recognise the value that they bring, and you know, the different mindset, and even the latest technology and fashion, if you like. You're a big part of that. To just talk us through, you know, being a woman in construction and being so successful at it.
Definitely women in construction wasn't around back 10, 20 years ago as much. It would tend to be wives doing the husband's books. sort of thing. That's what their role was. That was it. And even if that, I used to have other friends up north that were tradies' wives, and they would say, I don't even know how you do that, Mel. I don't know how to do it. So they said, I don't even open up his mail for that side of things. They refuse to do it, which is fine. But now definitely there's more and more women in construction. I think you've got women architects, you've got a lot of people are doing interior designers now, which is very female orientated. So you get a lot of female on site now. I honestly can say when I walk on site, all the tradespeople treat me with absolute respect. I don't believe they treat me any differently. I know them all so well now anyway, so it's always a bit of a laugh and what's going on and how's your son and all those kind of things. But it's not unusual now to see women on a construction site. But I think women can bring more elements to it. The first one being definitely is communication. I think, yes, about the intuition thing, women can have different kinds of intuition. Chris is having that intuition on. He's always thinking, if something happens, he always has that in his mind. If this happens, we can do this. And I can sometimes think, oh, Chris, no. But it pays off. It pays off. But on the communication side, that's the biggest thing that I try to push. If there's any kind of little issues that can happen in a business, I often say, communication, that's what happens. That's what happens when it doesn't communicate properly. It could be, you could have explained something so perfectly to a client, or Chris can think he has, explained something so perfectly to a client, and they're nodding and nodding and nodding, and then it gets built, and they go, that's not what I thought it was going to be. And so I look and go, okay, why did they not think it was that? Because weren't they shown a picture, or were they shown exactly where it was? A lot of the times client will nod, but they actually are too scared to say, I don't know what you're talking about. So what I try and do, if there's a quote or if it's at a business meeting and Chris is talking building stuff, I'll try and sometimes say, what do you mean there, Chris? Or what do you mean when you're saying you're going to put this into that? And sometimes he'll look at me as if to say, you know exactly what I mean, Mel. But I know that they don't, because the wife's looking at the husband and thinking, I hope he knows, and he's nodding, and because he doesn't want to say, I don't have any idea what you're talking about, those kind of things. So I think we can pick up facial expressions and body language and little things a little bit where Chris is concentrating on, we've just got to build to this timeline, and this is what it's got to happen. I've got to order this, and this is what it's going to look like. It's going to come into here, and it's going to be all these building terms. And I try to bring it down to more generalised terms of what are you talking about, and point it out what you mean. So that's what I try and do.
So your empathy levels are really high. You put yourself in their shoes, their pain, their emotions, and even like you just said, you know the answer. Chris knows the answer, but you'll ask maybe the perceived dumb question for them. Is that right?
Absolutely. And me putting myself in their shoes, even when sometimes someone could say on site that the client's being unreasonable about something, I'll always put myself in their shoes. Well, if they're only asking this and that, that's actually not unreasonable. If I was them and doing a build for the first time, not understanding the process or not knowing what comes next, I would be asking that question too. That is not unreasonable. So I do try and always put myself into their position to say, okay, are they being unreasonable, or no, that actually was a decent request. You just have to give them that. And then they'll turn around and go, oh, okay, yeah, you might be right, Mel. You're right. That wasn't unreasonable at all.
You've mentioned the challenges you've been through, and there are just day-to-day challenges of running a business, and we see the mental health issues that are in the industry. How do you look after each other? How do you make sure you're good? How do you make sure Chris is good, or your tradies? We
definitely pick up each other. Like if I can see Chris is struggling a bit, I lift. If he sees me struggling, he lifts. We sort of have a balancing act. We don't ever collapse at the same time. Chris is really good. He wakes up every morning 5:30, goes for a swim. He's learnt how to meditate he's met this lady on one of the walks of his swims who's taught him these things to meditate. He has a coffee every morning. He has his routine. It gets him reset, ready for the day. He also, after work, he goes to the gym all the time, so he understands the importance of being physically fit because he likes to be on the tools. He loves it. That's why he wanted to be a builder. He loves being outside and working on the tools. So not only does he understand physical fitness, he does understand it also helps with mental fitness. I have my gym, I've got my friends. We can release in other ways. I can walk the dog, I can get out and get a bit of sunshine. I've got the ability, luckily, that I work from home, so I can go out and just sit in the sun if I need to. But Chris and I together, we don't have holidays throughout the year. We find it too hard. We've tried it. But when you can't have a construction shutdown holiday, everyone's still working, so you get the phone calls. So we try and have long weekends away together. We'll have a Friday off or a Monday off. In fact, we're going away this weekend. So we're going up north to see family. So we try and have these little mini breaks, and it's a really good reset, recharge. We can have dinner dates. The funny thing is, we will always talk about business. We can't help ourselves. We try not to.
You make the rule, we're not talking about it tonight.
Yeah, you can't.
But by talking about not talking about it, you're already talking about it.
It's exactly what happens, and something will come out of it. But it tends to be, when we're on a holiday or a dinner and business comes in, it tends to be a positive thing. It's not like, oh my God. It's like, how unreal has that deck just come out? That is so beautiful. Or how nice are those clients who gave James a birthday cake for his, things like that. It's normally nice things, and that's because we actually love what we do. So of course you're going to talk about stuff that is a hobby or is a fun thing. To us, it's fun. So of course we're going to talk about it. So yeah, but that's how we try and reset, is our own way, and little getaways and things like that.
So you talked about business. You've talked about how you overcome battles, obviously balance in life, which is really cool. What's some of the advice as somebody who is, I would say, a professional in the industry, a woman in construction, you're really leading the way on the Northern Beaches. What's some of the advice you could give to people, or a quick 3 that you could share just to say, hey, nail these things and it'll be positive. The outcome will be better.
Because it depends on if I was speaking to another woman who's is a wife to a husband who's got a building business and they're thinking of leaving their job and joining. It really depends. There are so many people out there who say there is no way I could work with my husband, or there is no way I could work with my wife. I would say don't do it then, because you're going to ruin your marriage as well, because it is tough. There are times where you think, oh, there's a fine line of, should I continue doing this or not? Because I don't want it to affect our family life. So once you work out if you could possibly work with your partner in, it's nearly 24/7. I mean, you're living together and working with them. It is a thing. I grew up with my parents working together. So I grew up with small business. That was primary industry. It was 7 days a week. So it wasn't unusual for me for a husband and a wife to work together in a business. And I saw their challenges and their successes. And so it was just natural for me to say, well, that's what happens. And my father used to even say, all the good businesses, the wives were involved. That's what he used to say to me. So it was probably in my head that, well, that's just natural. But it's not for everyone. It's absolutely not for everyone. So that would be first thing. Could you work with your husband, or vice versa? The other thing I think is defining your roles. I know with other people who work with their husbands, sometimes it can clash. Oh, he's doing this and I'm supposed to be doing that, or he's not letting go and releasing some things and letting me do some of that. So there's definitely, you've got to sit down and say, well, I'm going to be doing this and you can do that. Obviously, there's going to be some crossovers sometimes, but we're very good at, you do that and I'll do that. We're very good at separating those two. The other thing I would say is don't stop learning. It doesn't matter how long you are in business for, you are constantly learning. Any little course that pops up on my email from HIA, little webinars, seminars, it could be on sales techniques, and I'll go, I'll listen to it. I'll have a listen. And it might be most of it, I'm like, yep. Oh, that's a good one. I'm going to add that one in too. So I definitely don't stop learning. Chris will say he doesn't have time, but that's all right. I can learn those things and I'll pass it on to him. So there might be a new material out there and I'll listen to all the technicalities of this thing and think, how can we use that? And then I'll say to Chris, I just listened to something really good about this new cladding product and it has this and that. And he goes, oh, he might say, nah, that's rubbish. But other times he might say, actually, that's good. We might use that on this job. So are they three things?
Now that's good, because that's one thing I would say you are very good at. You're constantly evolving, you're constantly learning, you want to challenge yourselves. And even Chris, he's one of those guys that will go, nope, handbrake it. And then 3 months later, all of a sudden he's the expert at it. He's embraced it and running with it. So it's really cool to see.
It's so true. And I think as well, that whole learning from your mistakes. So every time we do have a hiccup in something and Chris will say, oh, this has happened, that's happened. I keep saying, okay, what happened? How could have we done that better? Because we're about to do a job similar to that. We're not going to do that again. We're going to do it this way. So that's definitely something that if I've had another friend who was new at coming into the business, and she said, what can you tell me, one tip? And I was like, learn from your mistakes, because everyone's going to make them. We're human. We will continue to make mistakes, because that is life.
Well, you've evolved a lot over the last couple of decades. Can't wait to see where it all ends up in a few more. Keep evolving. Thank you for being part of the podcast.
Thank you for having me.